The explosion illuminates the Damascus night like a grotesque sunrise, turning shadows into ghosts. Time slows as concrete rains from the sky. In war, they say truth is the first casualty, but sometimes it's merely buried, waiting to resurface years later with the force of a second detonation. 8 years can change everything. A camera lens, once focused on humanity's darkest corners, now captures birthday smiles and sanitized corporate events. A warrior's hands, once steady on a rifle's trigger, now sign security contracts and build empires of protection. The past isn't just distant, it's presumed dead and buried, until a child walks into a towering office with determination in her eyes and a heart-shaped birthmark on her thumb. Some wounds never heal properly. Some secrets demand revelation. And sometimes, when your blood betrays you from within, the only salvation lies in the hands of strangers who were once everything, and could be again, if only time allows. Second chances rarely announce themselves. They arrive disguised as catastrophes. The explosion illuminated the Damascus night sky like a grotesque sunrise. Eleanor Morgan instinctively ducked behind the bombed-out concrete wall, her camera still gripped firmly in her hands. The air filled with dust and screams, familiar sounds after 15 years as a war photographer. "Stay down!" The command came from somewhere to her left, the voice deep and authoritative over the chaos. Eleanor pressed her body against the ground, the weight of her Kevlar vest suddenly insufficient against the fear pumping through her veins. 3 days into what should have been a routine documentation of refugee movements, and their media convoy had stumbled into an active combat zone. Through the settling dust, a figure moved toward her in a tactical crouch, broad-shouldered, face partially obscured by a scarf, eyes sharp and focused. Not military. Eleanor could tell by the lack of uniform. Private security. Then, "You hit?" the man asked, eyes scanning her body for injuries. "I'm fine," Eleanor managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "My team. Extracting through the East Corridor. I'm taking you to them." He checked his watch. "We have 4 minutes before the next sweep." In the dim light, their eyes met briefly, and Eleanor felt a strange jolt of recognition, though she was certain they'd never met. There was something in his gaze, a calm competence, that seemed out of place in the chaos surrounding them. "Marcus Dawson, Horizon Security," he said, checking his weapon. "When I say run, stay on my 6 and don't stop for anything." "Understood." Eleanor nodded, mentally preparing herself. She'd been in worse situations, but it never got easier. "Run." What followed was a blur of motion sprinting through narrow alleys, the sound of gunfire erupting behind them, Marcus's hand occasionally gripping her arm to guide her around corners. They reached a bombed-out apartment building where the rest of her team waited with other security personnel. Eleanor Tom Vickers, her longtime cameraman, rushed forward. "Jesus, we thought you got caught in that last blast." "Nearly did," she admitted, then nodded toward Marcus. "He found me." As the security team conferred about extraction routes, Eleanor took a moment to study their apparent leader. Marcus Dawson moved with the practiced efficiency of someone with military training special forces, if she had to guess. His face, now that she could see it clearly, was all angles and weathered lines, suggesting he was somewhere in his early 50s. Distinguished, with salt and pepper hair cropped close to his scalp and eyes that missed nothing. The kind of face that had seen too much but hadn't surrendered to cynicism. "Choppers inbound. 15 minutes, Marcus announced to the group. "We move to the extraction point in 5. Check your gear." While the others prepared, he approached Eleanor. "You're bleeding." Eleanor glanced down, surprised to discover a gash on her forearm, likely from debris during the explosion. In the adrenaline rush, she hadn't even felt it. "It's nothing," she said automatically. Marcus gave her a look that said he'd heard that particular lie too many times. Without asking permission, he knelt beside her, pulling a compact med kit from his tactical vest. "This might sting," he warned, applying antiseptic to the wound with surprising gentleness for hands so large and battle-worn. Eleanor watched him work. noting the focused precision in his movements, the small scar near his right temple, the way his expression remained professionally neutral despite the chaos outside. In her years covering conflict zones, she'd encountered countless security contractors. Most were either adrenaline junkies or mercenaries chasing easy money. Marcus Dawson seemed different somehow. "You don't seem like the typical private security type," she observed. A faint smile touched his lips but didn't reach his eyes. "And what type is that? The kind that sees us journalists as liabilities rather than the job." "You are liabilities," he replied matter-of-factly, securing a bandage around her arm. "But the job is keeping you alive, not just checking a box." Before Eleanor could respond, gunfire erupted outside. Closer this time. Marcus was on his feet instantly, weapon ready. "Time to move. Stay close." The next hours passed in a blur of tactical movements, the helicopter extraction under fire, and finally, the relief of reaching the relative safety of their compound outside Damascus. Throughout it all, Eleanor found herself repeatedly in Marcus's orbit, his calm presence a counterpoint to the chaos surrounding them. Later that night, as their team processed the day's footage in the compound's makeshift editing room, Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Mind if I check your arm?" he asked without preamble. Eleanor nodded, following him to a quieter corner of the common area. As he carefully removed the bandage to inspect the wound, she found herself studying his face again. "Why Syria?" she asked. "Horizon could have you protecting oil executives in cushy compounds." "Could ask you the same question," he countered. "Pulitzer winner like you could be taking portrait shots of politicians back home." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "You Googled me." "I research everyone I'm assigned to protect." He applied fresh antibiotic ointment to her wound. "But I already knew your work. Your Afghanistan series. The refugee camp in South Sudan." "You didn't answer my question." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hand still gentle on her arm. "Some of us are better suited for complicated places." Something in his tone suggested depths he wasn't sharing, but Eleanor recognized the boundaries. They were, after all, ships passing in a turbulent sea. In a week, this assignment would end, and they'd return to their separate worlds. Yet something about Marcus Dawson lingered in her thoughts that night as she tried to sleep, the steady confidence in his movements, the momentary connection when their eyes met amid chaos, the careful way he'd tended her wound. Just professional interest, she told herself. Nothing more. She couldn't have known how tragically wrong she was. The memory dissolved as Eleanor opened her eyes to the sterile white ceiling of Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago. 8 years had passed since Syria, since the bomb that changed everything, since Marcus Dawson had disappeared from her life as suddenly as he'd entered it. "Mom, are you awake?" Eleanor turned to see her 12-year-old daughter, Sophia, peering at her with concern etched across her young face. Too much concern for a child her age. "Just resting my eyes, sweetheart," Eleanor managed, forcing a smile. "What time is it?" "Almost 4. Your appointment's in 20 minutes. Sophia held up a glass of water with a straw. "Dr. Winter said to make sure you stay hydrated before the scan." Eleanor took a small sip, studying her daughter's face. Sophia had inherited Eleanor's auburn hair and determination, but her eyes deep brown with flecks of amber, those came from her father. A father she'd never met and knew almost nothing about. The weight of that secrecy felt heavier with each passing day, especially now. "You know you don't have to miss science club for these appointments," Eleanor said, sitting up carefully to minimize the dizziness. "Mrs. Patel offered to drive me." Sophia's expression turned stubborn, so reminiscent of her own that Eleanor almost laughed despite the circumstances. "I'm not leaving you alone with doctors who talk around you like you're not there," Sophia declared, arranging Eleanor's scarf with practiced efficiency. "Besides, I've already read the material for today's meeting." Of course she had. At 12, Sophia consumed scientific information with a veracity that both impressed and occasionally concerned Eleanor. Lately, That focus had shifted almost exclusively to oncology and hematology. A 12-year-old shouldn't be able to discuss blood cell counts and treatment protocols with such fluency. But then, normal 12-year-olds weren't watching their mothers battle acute myeloid leukemia. The diagnosis had come 3 months ago. Though the symptoms had been present longer, the unexplained bruising, the bone-deep fatigue Eleanor had attributed to overwork, the persistent infections that wouldn't clear. Her doctor had mentioned possible links to chemical exposure in conflict zones, something about benzene and radiation. The irony wasn't lost on Eleanor. She'd survived sniper fire, bombings, and collapsing buildings only to be betrayed by her own blood. As they made their way to the oncology department, Eleanor tried not to lean too heavily on Sophia. The roles shouldn't be reversed like this. She should be supporting her daughter, not the other way around. Miss Morgan, Doctor, Winters greeted them in the consultation room after the scan, her expression carefully neutral. Sophia, thank you for being so prompt. Eleanor had chosen Dr. Emily Winters specifically for her straightforward approach. No sugarcoating, no false optimism, just facts and options. Today, however, something in the doctor's demeanor triggered Eleanor's journalist instincts. There was news, and it wasn't good. The latest scans show progression despite the standard induction therapy, Dr. Winters began, turning her computer screen so Eleanor could see the images. The blast cells aren't responding as we'd hoped. Eleanor felt Sophia's hand slip into hers, squeezing tightly. What's the next step? Eleanor asked, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. Dr. Winters leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. There's a clinical trial at Northwestern for cases like yours, a novel targeted therapy combined with modified stem cell treatment. The preliminary results have been promising for patients with similar genetic markers. Hope flickered briefly until Dr. Winters continued. The challenge is that your insurance won't cover experimental treatments. The out-of-pocket cost would be substantial. How substantial? Eleanor asked, though she already suspected the answer would be beyond her means. The treatment protocol runs approximately $475,000. The figure hung in the air like a death sentence. Eleanor's freelance photography work, while respected in the industry, had never translated to financial security. The modest savings she'd accumulated had already been depleted by deductibles and out-of-network consultations. There are financial assistance programs, Dr. Winters added, sliding a folder across the desk. And the hospital's patient advocacy office can help navigate options. Eleanor nodded mechanically, taking the folder. Next to her, Sophia sat unnaturally still, her eyes fixed on the scan images still displayed on the computer screen. How long? Sophia asked suddenly, her voice small but determined. Dr. Winters looked to Eleanor, silently asking permission to be frank in front of the child. Eleanor nodded. Sophia would find out anyway. She always did. Without the new treatment, and if the standard protocols continue to be ineffective, we're looking at 8 to 12 months. 8 to 12 months. The words echoed in Eleanor's mind as they left the hospital, the Chicago wind whipping around them as they waited for the bus. 8 to 12 months to prepare Sophia for a world without her. 8 to 12 months to somehow secure her daughter's future. And what of Marcus Dawson? The question surfaced unexpectedly, as it sometimes did in moments of crisis. Would he want to know he had a daughter? Would he even remember the week in Syria that had changed Eleanor's life irrevocably? The bus arrived, mercifully empty at this hour, and they found seats near the back. Eleanor watched the city pass by outside the window, the gleaming skyscrapers of downtown giving way to the more modest neighborhoods as they headed north. Their apartment in Rogers Park was small but comfortable, close enough to the lake for weekend walks when Eleanor had the energy. We should get groceries, Eleanor said, trying to inject normalcy into the day. I think we're out of... I know what the clinical trial is, Sophia interrupted, her eyes still fixed forward. It's the NK cell therapy with the modified CRISPR approach. I read about it in the Journal of Hematology. Eleanor suppressed a sigh. Of course she had. It has a 78% response rate for patients with the FLT3 mutation, Sophia continued, which I'm guessing you have, based on Dr. Winter's reference to genetic markers. Sophia, don't tell me not to worry, her daughter said fiercely, finally turning to face her. I'm not a little kid. I understand what's happening. Eleanor's heart ached at the adulthood being forced prematurely onto her daughter's shoulders. I know you do, sweetheart, but this isn't your burden to carry. It is if you die. The bluntness of the statement hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Before she could respond, Sophia continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. I've been researching financial assistance programs. Most of them only cover a fraction of the costs, and they take months to process. We don't have months. The bus lurched to a stop, and Eleanor realized they'd reached their neighborhood. As they walked the 2 blocks to their apartment, she tried to formulate a response that would reassure Sophia without lying. Their building was a pre-war brick walk-up, 3 stories with no elevator. On good days, Eleanor barely noticed the climb to their second-floor apartment. Today, each step required concentration. Inside, the apartment was modestly furnished but filled with evidence of their life together. Sophia's science fair ribbons displayed proudly on the wall. Eleanor's photographs from less dangerous assignments. Bookshelves overflowing with everything from classic literature to scientific journals. I'll make dinner, Sophia announced, dropping her backpack and heading for the kitchen with the efficiency of someone accustomed to taking charge. Eleanor wanted to protest that it should be her job, but the fatigue settling into her bones made the argument hollow. Instead, she moved to her small home office, where the latest batch of freelance assignments awaited review. The work was steady but uninspiring corporate events, local gallery exhibitions, the occasional magazine spread, nothing like the impactful photojournalism that had once defined her career. She'd stepped back from conflict zones when Sophia was born, unwilling to risk orphaning her child. Now, the safer path seemed a cruel joke. She was facing death anyway, just slower and without purpose. Eleanor opened her laptop, scanning through emails with half-hearted interest until one subject line caught her attention. Pharmaceutical whistleblower follow-up. 3 weeks ago, she'd been approached by a former employee of Meridian Pharmaceuticals about documenting alleged price fixing for cancer treatments. Eleanor had done some preliminary research, enough to believe there might be a legitimate story, but her declining health had forced her to put the investigation on hold. She opened the email. Ms. Morgan, I noticed you haven't responded to my previous messages. The situation at Meridian has escalated. They're deliberately delaying the release of a breakthrough AML treatment to manipulate market pricing. I have documentation proving they've had FDA approval for 3 months, but are creating artificial scarcity to justify a 300% markup. People are dying while they play with stock prices. Please contact me. You might be the only journalist who understands both the medical and ethical implications. J. Eleanor stared at the screen, a chill running through her that had nothing to do with her illness, acute myeloid leukemia. AML, her diagnosis. If this whistleblower was correct, a treatment that could potentially save her life was being withheld for profit. Mom, dinner's ready. Sophia appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. Eleanor quickly closed the laptop. Thanks, sweetheart. It smells great. Over pasta with jarred sauce, Sophia's specialty. Eleanor watched her daughter surreptitiously. Despite the adult responsibilities she'd taken on, there were still glimpses of the child beneath the way she methodically separated the different pasta shapes on her plate. Her excitement when describing a new scientific concept she'd learned. There's a science competition next month, Sophia mentioned casually, though Eleanor could tell by her tone that this was the real purpose of the conversation. Horizon Security Group is sponsoring it. The grand prize is a $50,000 scholarship and $25,000 cash. Eleanor set down her fork. Horizon Security. Yeah, it's some big company that provides security for journalists and aid workers in dangerous places. Sophia continued, not noticing Eleanor's reaction. The competition is about innovative approaches to global challenges. I'm thinking of entering with a project on affordable medical diagnostics for developing countries. Horizon Security. Marcus Dawson's company. The coincidence was too precise to be random. How did you hear about this competition? Eleanor asked carefully. Sophia shrugged with studied casualness. My science teacher mentioned it. I looked it up online. It's legitimate, they've done it for 3 years now. She hesitated before adding, the deadline for entries is next week. Eleanor recognized the unspoken question. You should definitely enter. Your diagnostics idea is brilliant. Relief washed over Sophia's face. Really, I wasn't sure if you'd want me to, with everything going on. Especially with everything going on, Eleanor insisted, reaching across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. We don't put life on hold. Remember, it was their mantra, established in the early days after the diagnosis. Life continued. Plans proceeded. Hope persisted. Even if privately, Eleanor's hope was fading with each new medical report. Later that night, after Sophia had gone to bed, Eleanor returned to her computer and searched for information about Horizon Security Group. The company had grown substantially in the 8 years since she'd encountered its founder in Syria. Now headquartered in Chicago, with operations in 27 countries, Horizon specialized in protecting journalists, aid workers, and medical personnel in conflict zones. Their website featured a brief profile of the founder and CEO. Marcus Dawson, former Navy SEAL, established the company after 15 years of military service, committed to safeguarding those who bear witness to global crises. The accompanying photograph showed an older version of the man. Eleanor remembered more lines around his eyes, more silver in his hair, but the same intense focus. She traced the image with her fingertip, remembering how those hands had bandaged her arm with such unexpected gentleness, how those same hands had explored her body the night before everything went to hell. The week in Syria had ended in catastrophe, a massive bombing at a press conference. Multiple casualties, including 2 journalists from Eleanor's team. She'd escaped with minor injuries, but in the chaos of evacuation and survivors' guilt, she'd been told Marcus was among the critically wounded, unlikely to survive. 2 months later, back in the States and still processing the trauma, Eleanor had discovered she was pregnant. She'd tried to find information about Marcus then, wanting to at least inform his family about the child, but Horizon Security had stonewalled her inquiries. Eventually, she'd stopped trying, focusing instead on building a life for herself and her daughter. Now, 8 years later, Marcus Dawson was not only alive but flourishing in the same city where she'd built their life. And Sophia, whether by intuition or coincidence, was about to enter his orbit. Eleanor closed the laptop, her mind racing. Should she contact him directly? Would he even remember her? And if he did, what claim could she make after 8 years of silence? More pressingly, how would Sophia react to learning about her father after years of carefully deflected questions? Eleanor had always told her daughter that her father had been a good man who died before she was born, not entirely a lie, given what she'd believed at the time. To upend that narrative now, especially with her illness progression? No, better to let sleeping dogs lie. Her focus needed to be on treatment options, on securing Sophia's future. The past, with all its complications and what-ifs, would have to remain buried, or so she thought. The Chicago spring morning dawned clear and crisp as Sophia Morgan made her final preparations for the Horizon Science Challenge presentation. For 2 weeks, she had worked feverishly on her project, not the medical diagnostics idea she'd mentioned to her mother, but something far more personal, a comprehensive analysis of emerging treatments for acute myeloid leukemia, with specific focus on cost reduction strategies. If she couldn't afford to buy her mother the treatment she needed, perhaps she could help create a more affordable version. You have everything, Eleanor asked from the doorway, looking pale but determined to see her daughter off. Your presentation board USB drive, all packed, Sophia confirmed, carefully placing her laptop in her backpack. Are you sure you don't want to come? I reserved a seat for you. Eleanor smiled apologetically. I've got that freelance shoot at the Botanical Gardens. Remember, but I'll be there for the awards ceremony this afternoon. She didn't mention that she'd scheduled the job specifically to avoid the Horizon building, to avoid any chance encounter with Marcus Dawson. Promise, Sophia pressed. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. After a quick hug, Sophia headed out, her mind already rehearsing her presentation. The competition was being held at Horizon's headquarters in downtown Chicago, a gleaming tower of glass and steel overlooking Lake Michigan. As her bus approached the city center, Sophia mentally reviewed what she knew about the company hosting the event. Horizon Security Group had been founded by Marcus Dawson, a former Navy SEAL, approximately 15 years ago. Initially focused on high-risk private security, the company had evolved to specialize in protecting journalists, aid workers, and medical personnel in conflict zones. Their ethical approach to security had earned them contracts with major news organizations and humanitarian agencies. Sophia had researched thoroughly both the company and its founder. Something about Horizon had intrigued her from the moment her science teacher mentioned the competition. Perhaps it was their connection to journalism, like her mother's work, or perhaps it was something else, some intuition she couldn't quite name. The bus stopped 3 blocks from her destination, and Sophia joined the stream of pedestrians heading downtown. As she waited at a crosswalk, a commotion erupted from a convenience store just ahead, shouting, followed by 2 men bursting through the doors and sprinting down the sidewalk. "Stop them, robbery!" the store clerk yelled from the doorway. Before she could process what was happening, the fleeing men were heading directly toward her. Acting on instinct, Sophia raised her phone and snapped several rapid photos of their faces. One of the men noticed, his eyes locking with hers for a brief, terrifying moment. "The kid got our faces," he shouted to his partner. "Get her phone." Panic surged through Sophia as the men changed direction, now coming straight for her. She bolted, weaving through startled pedestrians, her backpack bouncing against her spine as she ran. The Horizon building was only 2 blocks away if she could reach it. There would be security, cutting through an alley. Sophia risked a glance back. One of the men was gaining on her, his face contorted with anger. She pushed herself harder, lungs burning, the weight of her project materials suddenly a liability. The Horizon Tower loomed ahead, its entrance visible now. Just 100 more yards. Sophia felt a hand grab at her backpack, yanking her backward. She stumbled, nearly falling, but managed to twist away, leaving the man holding her backpack as she sprinted the final distance to the building's entrance. Bursting through the revolving doors, she collided with someone exiting a solid wall of a person who caught her reflexively before she could fall. "Whoa there," a deep voice said, hands steadying her shoulders. "Are you all right?" Sophia looked up into the face of an older man with salt and pepper hair and intense eyes, dressed in a tailored suit that couldn't quite disguise his athletic build. Recognition flashed through her. She'd seen this face during her research. "Please help," she gasped. "Those men, they robbed a store. They're chasing me because I took their picture." As if on cue, the 2 robbers appeared outside the building's glass facade, hesitating when they saw Sophia wasn't alone. The man, Marcus Dawson, Sophia realized with shock, assessed the situation in an instant. He positioned himself between Sophia and the entrance, gesturing sharply to the security guards at the reception desk. "Call CPD," he ordered. "Attempted robbery and assault on a minor." One of the men outside made a move toward the entrance. Without hesitation, Marcus strode outside to confront them, his posture radiating calm authority. What happened next occurred so quickly that Sophia could hardly process it. When one of the robbers lunged forward, Marcus moved with astonishing speed for a man his age, a precise strike, a controlled takedown, and the assailant was on the ground, subdued. The second man turned to flee but was intercepted by Horizon's security personnel emerging from the building. Within minutes, both men were restrained, and police sirens could be heard approaching. Sophia remained in the lobby, shaking slightly from adrenaline and amazement. She just witnessed the CEO of Horizon Security personally take down an armed robber. More importantly, she'd just been rescued by the man whose competition might help save her mother's life. Marcus returned to the lobby, straightening his suit jacket as if nothing unusual had occurred. When he approached Sophia, His expression had softened from tactical assessment to genuine concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked, kneeling slightly to meet her eye level, despite their small height difference. A gesture that struck Sophia as both respectful and practiced, as if he was accustomed to speaking with children. "I'm fine," she managed, "but they took my backpack. My whole science project was in there." Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. "You're here for the science challenge." Sophia nodded miserably. "I've been working on it for weeks." Marcus checked his watch, then made a decision. "Officer Reynolds will take your statement when the police arrive. Meanwhile, let's see if we can recover your materials." He led her to an elevator, using a key card to access a private floor. As they ascended, Sophia studied him surreptitiously. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't place what. Perhaps she'd just seen too many photos during her research. The elevator opened directly into what appeared to be a crisis management center, a large room with multiple screens displaying news feeds and global maps. Several staff members looked up in surprise as Marcus entered with a young girl in tow. "Sullivan," Marcus addressed a woman at a computer station. "We need to recover a stolen backpack. Purple. Taken approximately 10 minutes ago by suspects now in custody outside." The woman Sullivan nodded briskly. "On it, boss." Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she accessed what appeared to be security camera footage. "Got visual 3 blocks west. Suspect dropped the bag in the alley during pursuit. Send Taylor to retrieve it," Marcus instructed, then turned to Sophia. "It should be back in your hands shortly. In the meantime, why don't you tell me about this project of yours?" Sophia hesitated. Her project was deeply personal, revealing more about her mother's condition than they typically shared with strangers. But something about Marcus Dawson inspired trust, perhaps the efficiency with which he'd handled the crisis, or the genuine interest in his eyes. "It's about making leukemia treatments more accessible," she began carefully, "specifically for AML, acute myeloid leukemia." A flicker of something crossed Marcus's face: recognition, perhaps, or concern. "That's an unusual focus for someone your age." Sophia straightened her shoulders, preparing for the dismissal she sometimes received from adults. "I'm 12, and I've been researching oncology for 3 months now." Instead of the condescension she expected, Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "What sparked your interest in this particular cancer?" The direct question caught her off guard. Adults usually danced around sensitive topics with children, but Marcus spoke to her as he might to a colleague. "My mother has AML," Sophia admitted. "She needs a new treatment that our insurance won't cover because it's experimental." Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes, followed by genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry to hear that. It's a difficult diagnosis." "She's going to get better," Sophia said with more confidence than she felt. "She has to." Before Marcus could respond, the elevator doors opened and a security officer appeared with Sophia's backpack. "Found it exactly where Sullivan said it would be," the man reported, handing the bag to Marcus, who immediately passed it to Sophia. "Check that everything's there," he suggested. Sophia quickly inventoried the contents: laptop, presentation materials, notes, all present, though her water bottle had leaked slightly, dampening some papers. "It's all here," she confirmed, relief evident in her voice. "Thank you." Marcus checked his watch again. "The first round of presentations starts in 20 minutes. Why don't we get you registered and settled?" As they rode the elevator down to the event floor, Sophia gathered her courage to ask the question that had been forming since the incident. "Mr. Dawson," she began, "is it true that Horizon provides security for journalists in war zones?" He glanced at her, something like amusement flickering in his eyes. "It is, among other services. My mom used to be a war photographer," Sophia continued. "Before I was born, she won a Pulitzer for her work in Afghanistan." Marcus's hand, which had been reaching to press a button on the elevator panel, paused momentarily. "Is that so? What's your mother's name?" "Eleanor Morgan." The change in Marcus's demeanor was subtle but unmistakable, a slight stiffening of his shoulders. a new intensity in his gaze as it returned to Sophia's face, studying her with fresh interest. "Eleanor Morgan," he repeated, as if testing the name. "I believe I may have encountered her work." The elevator doors opened onto a bustling conference space where dozens of young participants were setting up their projects at assigned stations. The moment for further conversation passed as they were approached by an event coordinator. "Mr. Ranam, Dawson, we weren't expecting you down here until the judging round." The woman's eyes shifted to Sophia. "And you must be one of our participants." "Sophia Morgan," she supplied. "There was an incident with my registration materials, but Mr. Dawson helped sort it out." The coordinator checked her tablet. "Morgan, yes, here you are. Station 17 down the left aisle." As Sophia was led away, she glanced back at Marcus Dawson. He remained where they'd parted, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Thoughtful, intense, almost searching. She raised her hand in a small wave of thanks. After a moment's hesitation, he returned the gesture, then turned and disappeared back toward the elevators. Strange, Sophia thought as she began setting up her presentation. Something about their interaction felt unfinished, as if an important conversation had been interrupted before it could properly begin. Pushing the thought aside, she focused on preparing her materials. The competition was her priority. Now winning this prize could change everything for her mother. Marcus Dawson strode through the executive floor of Horizon headquarters, his mind racing. Eleanor Morgan, a name he hadn't heard in 8 years, not since the Damascus bombing that had nearly killed him and had fundamentally altered the trajectory of his life. He entered his office when closing the door with unusual firmness. "Sullivan," he called through the intercom, "I need everything we have on Eleanor Morgan, photojournalist, priority access." "The war photographer," came the surprised response. "Right away, sir." While waiting, Marcus moved to the window, staring out at Lake Michigan without really seeing it. The girl Sophia was approximately 12 years old. Her eyes, the shape of her face, the determined set of her jaw, all achingly familiar in ways that had nothing to do with Eleanor Morgan. And that birthmark at the base of her right thumb, visible when she'd waved goodbye, identical to his own. The implications were simultaneously overwhelming and crystal clear. His computer chimed with an incoming file. Marcus returned to his desk, opening the dossier Sullivan had compiled. Eleanor Morgan's professional history was impressive. The Pulitzer for her Afghanistan coverage, numerous international awards, a reputation for unflinching documentation of human suffering and resilience in conflict zones. Then, abruptly, a career shift approximately 8 years ago. No more war zones, no more frontline reporting. Instead, gallery exhibitions, commercial work, the occasional human interest piece for national magazines, all based in Chicago. 8 years. The timing aligned perfectly with the Damascus bombing and, he now suspected, with Sophia's birth. Marcus leaned back in his chair, memories surfacing that he'd long kept buried. The week in Syria had been standard until Eleanor Morgan had somehow breached his carefully maintained professional boundaries. There had been something immediate between them, a recognition that transcended the chaos surrounding them. Intellectual equals drawn together by shared experiences in the world's broken places. One night of connection before everything went to hell. The bombing had left Marcus with a traumatic brain injury that erased portions of his memory from the weeks surrounding the incident. He remembered Eleanor, remembered their conversations, remembered feeling something profound for her. But the specifics of their final interactions remained frustratingly blank, a side effect of the injury that neurologists had warned might never resolve. After 6 months of grueling rehabilitation, he'd attempted to locate her, only to discover she'd left the conflict journalism circuit entirely. With no personal contact information and only professional channels that led nowhere, he'd eventually stopped searching, filing Eleanor Morgan away as another casualty of his dangerous profession, not dead, but lost to him nonetheless. Now, 12 years later, the daughter he never knew he had was participating in his company's science competition, working on a project inspired by her mother's illness. Eleanor was sick, acute myeloid leukemia, an aggressive cancer with poor prognosis unless treated with the newest protocols. Protocols that, according to Sophia, were financially out of reach. Marcus reached for his phone, then hesitated. What exactly was he planning to do? Call Eleanor out of the blue after 8 years, announce that he'd met their daughter, offer financial assistance for her treatment as if that wouldn't raise 1,000 complicated questions? No, he needed more information before making contact. Understanding the full situation would allow him to approach this delicate situation strategically. His intercom buzzed. "Sir," Sullivan's voice came through. "I have additional information on Eleanor Morgan, current address, employment status, and," she hesitated, "medical records from Northwestern Memorial." Marcus frowned. "Medical records, those should be private." They were accessed through Meridian Pharmaceuticals' database. Apparently, she's been researching their clinical trials. Meridian Pharmaceuticals, one of Horizon's largest corporate clients, providing security for their research facilities and executive protection for their leadership team. Marcus had never been comfortable with the contract. Something about Meridian's business practices set off his ethical alarm bells, but their retainer helped fund Horizon's humanitarian security operations. "Send everything to my secure server," he instructed. "And Sullivan, this stays between us?" "Understood, sir." As he reviewed Eleanor's medical information, a cold anger began building in Marcus's chest. The clinical notes confirmed Sophia's statement Eleanor needed access to an experimental treatment protocol that her insurance wouldn't cover. What the girl didn't know, and what the medical records made clear, was that without this treatment, Eleanor's prognosis was measured in months, not years. Even more disturbing was an internal Meridian memo accidentally included in the file, a discussion of pricing strategy for their new AML treatment, emphasizing the need to maximize market potential before generic competition by setting an aggressive price point reflective of the treatment's life-saving potential. In other words, charging desperate patients the maximum amount their lives were worth. The same company whose executive team Horizon protected was effectively holding Eleanor's treatment hostage for profit. The irony was bitter enough to choke on. Marcus closed the files. His decision made, he would attend the science competition personally, evaluate Sophia's project, and find a way to speak with Eleanor when she came for the award ceremony. No dramatic revelations, no disruption to their lives, just an offer of assistance framed as recognition of Sophia's work. It was the least he could do for the family he never knew he had. What Marcus couldn't possibly anticipate was that events had already been set in motion that would make such a controlled approach impossible. Because at that very moment, as Sophia prepared to present her project downstairs, Eleanor Morgan was not at the botanical gardens, as she'd told her daughter. Instead, she was meeting with a whistleblower from Meridian Pharmaceuticals in a cafe 3 blocks from Horizon headquarters, discussing evidence of criminal price fixing for the very treatment she desperately needed. And the men who had attempted to rob Sophia earlier weren't random criminals, but Meridian's corporate security, attempting to recover the USB drive containing incriminating documents that the girl had unwittingly picked up after it was passed to her mother. The collision course was set, with Marcus Dawson, Eleanor Morgan, and the daughter who connected them hurtling toward a reckoning none of them were prepared for. Eleanor checked her watch nervously as she waited in the corner booth of Lakeside Cafe. The meeting with Janelle Porter, the Meridian whistleblower, had been arranged hastily after Eleanor received a thumb drive containing internal documents about the company's price manipulation strategies. The evidence was damning emails discussing how to maximize profits by creating artificial scarcity, documentation of FDA approval being deliberately delayed to justify higher pricing, even a cost analysis showing the actual production expenses for the AML treatment were less than 1/10 of the intended market price. Publishing this story could force Meridian to release the treatment at a reasonable cost, could potentially save Eleanor's life and countless others. But first, she needed Janelle to verify the document's authenticity on record. The cafe door opened, and Eleanor tensed, expecting her contact. Instead, a man in a dark suit entered, scanning the room with practiced efficiency before taking a seat near the door. Something about his posture and alertness triggered Eleanor's journalist instincts. He moved like security, not like a casual coffee patron. Eleanor casually gathered her belongings, leaving enough cash to cover her untouched coffee. Years of working in dangerous environments had taught her to recognize surveillance, and every instinct now told her something was wrong. As she slipped out the back entrance, her phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Don't go to meeting? Compromised. Meridian knows about drive. Get somewhere safe." Eleanor's heart raced as she quickened her pace through the alley behind the cafe. If Meridian knew about the thumb drive, they would be looking for her. More worryingly, the drive was currently in Sophia's backpack. Eleanor had hidden it there that morning, believing it would be safer with her daughter at a public event than with her at a potentially risky meeting. She needed to get to Horizon headquarters immediately. Emerging onto a side street, Eleanor hailed a taxi, constantly checking for pursuers. As the cab pulled away, she saw two men exit the cafe, looking in her direction with unmistakable purpose. "Horizon Tower, please," she instructed the driver. "As quickly as possible." During the short drive, Eleanor tried calling Sophia, but the call went straight to voicemail. Her daughter would have her phone silenced during the competition. Anxiety clawed at Eleanor's chest, not just from the immediate danger, but from the knowledge that she'd inadvertently placed Sophia at risk. The taxi pulled up to Horizon's imposing entrance. Eleanor paid quickly and hurried inside, her journalist's eye automatically noting security positions and exit routes, old habits from dangerous assignments that had never quite faded. At the reception desk, she composed herself. "I'm here for the science challenge. My daughter is a participant, Sophia Morgan." The receptionist checked her computer. "The presentations are in progress on the third floor. I can direct you to the observation area." "Thank you." Eleanor accepted a visitor's badge, fighting the urge to run as she followed directions to the elevator. The third floor was bustling with activity, dozens of science projects displayed around a large conference space, small groups of judges moving methodically from station to station. Eleanor scanned the room, finally spotting Sophia at a booth near the far wall, confidently explaining her project to an older woman with a clipboard. Relief washed over Eleanor, followed immediately by renewed urgency. She needed to get Sophia and the thumb drive away from here before Meridian's people tracked them down. As she made her way across the room, Eleanor became aware of a tall figure entering from a side door, a man whose silhouette she would recognize anywhere. Despite the passing years, Marcus Dawson, he hadn't seen her yet, his attention focused on the judging process as he spoke with event staff. Eleanor froze, caught between the need to reach Sophia and the shock of seeing Marcus in person after believing him dead for so long. He looked different, more silver in his hair, new lines around his eyes, yet essentially unchanged. The same commanding presence, the same focused intensity as he surveyed the room. Then his gaze landed on her, and time seemed to stop. Recognition flickered in his eyes, followed by something Eleanor couldn't quite interpret: surprise. Certainly, but also a deeper emotion that made her heart race for reasons unrelated to her current predicament. Before either could react, commotion erupted at the main entrance. Two men in suits, the same ones Eleanor had spotted outside the cafe, were arguing with security. One pointed in Eleanor's direction, and security turned to look. Marcus followed their gaze, his expression sharpening as he assessed the situation with military precision. In an instant, he was moving toward Eleanor with purposeful strides. "Ms. Morgan," he said formally as he reached her, though his eyes communicated volumes more. "There appears to be a security situation. Please come with me." Without waiting for her response, he placed a guiding hand at the small of her back, steering her toward Sophia's booth. The contact, brief and professional as it was, sent an unexpected jolt through Eleanor's system, a physical memory of connection that 8 years hadn't erased. "Mom," Sophia looked up in surprise as they approached. "You're early. I thought you had the botanical gardens shoot." "Change of plans," Eleanor managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Sophia, this is Mr. Dawson," Sophia supplied, looking between them with confusion. "You know each other." Before Eleanor could respond, Marcus cut in smoothly. "Your mother and I have crossed paths professionally. Sophia, we need to move to a secure location. Bring your project materials." To Eleanor's surprise, Sophia complied without question, quickly gathering her laptop and notes. The trust her daughter showed this man she'd just met was both concerning and oddly reassuring. Marcus guided them toward a service elevator, his body positioned protectively between them and the main entrance where security was still engaged with the Meridian men. He pressed his palm against a biometric scanner, and the elevator doors opened immediately. "What's happening?" Eleanor demanded once they were inside and the doors had closed. "I was hoping you could tell me," Marcus replied, his voice carefully neutral. "Two men attempting to access a secure event, specifically looking for you. Corporate security, not law enforcement." Eleanor hesitated, glancing at Sophia, who was watching their interaction with keen interest. "It's complicated," she said finally, "and not a conversation for right now." Marcus accepted this with a nod, turning his attention to Sophia. "Your project presentation was impressive. The judges were particularly interested in your cost analysis for treatment production." Despite the tense situation, Sophia beamed. "Really, I spent weeks researching pharmaceutical manufacturing processes." "It showed," Marcus assured her, then returned his gaze to Eleanor. "Your daughter is remarkably knowledgeable about oncology treatments." The way he emphasized "your daughter" carried a question Eleanor wasn't ready to address. Instead, she focused on the immediate concern. "Where are you taking us?" "My private office. It's secure." The elevator stopped, opening directly into a reception area with a spectacular view of Lake Michigan. "Sullivan," Marcus addressed a woman at a nearby desk. "No visitors. Security Protocol Alpha." The woman nodded briskly, her eyes flickering curiously between Eleanor and Sophia before she returned to her computer. Marcus led them into a spacious office dominated by a large desk and floor-to-ceiling windows. Various photographs decorated the walls, not personal images, but professional shots of Horizon teams in various global locations. Eleanor recognized several conflict zones she'd covered in her previous career. "Please, sit." Marcus gestured to a seating area with comfortable chairs. "Can I offer you anything, water, coffee?" The formality was surreal given their history and the current circumstances. Eleanor declined with a shake of her head, while Sophia asked for water. Once they were settled, Marcus addressed Eleanor directly. "Those men work for Meridian Pharmaceuticals. They've been looking for you since you left a meeting at Lakeside Cafe approximately 40 minutes ago." Eleanor stiffened. "How do you know that?" "Horizon provides executive security for Meridian," Marcus replied evenly. "Their head of security contacted us when they realized you were headed to our building." "You work for Meridian?" Eleanor's voice sharpened with accusation. "We provide services to them," Marcus corrected, "though that relationship is currently under review." Sophia looked between them, confusion evident on her face. "What does a pharmaceutical company want with you?" "Mom." Eleanor hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. Before she could decide, Marcus spoke again. "I believe it has something to do with a thumb drive containing evidence of price fixing for their new AML treatment," he said calmly. "The same treatment you need?" The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor stared at Marcus, shock and suspicion warring in her expression. "How could you possibly know that?" she finally managed. Instead of answering directly, Marcus turned to Sophia. "May I see your backpack?" Sophia glanced at her mother, who nodded reluctantly. Marcus examined the purple backpack, finding a small tear in the lining near the bottom. Carefully, he extracted a black thumb drive that had slipped into the fabric. "I believe this is what they're looking for," he said, holding up the drive. "And I believe you placed it there?" "Eleanor, thinking it would be safer with Sophia than with you during your meeting with the whistleblower. Eleanor rose to her feet, anger and fear making her voice shake. If you're working with Meridian, you should know their security men threatened my daughter this morning. They chased her down the street trying to get that drive. What? Sophia exclaimed. Those were the robbers who took my backpack. Not robbers, Eleanor corrected grimly. Corporate thugs trying to protect their profits. Marcus's expression darkened. I was unaware of that detail. The men downstairs described the incident as an attempted retrieval of stolen property. It's not stolen, Eleanor countered. It was given to me by someone inside Meridian who couldn't stand watching people die while the company plays pricing games. Marcus studied the thumb drive in his hand, then made a decision. He walked to his computer, inserted the drive, and began reviewing the files. His expression grew increasingly grim as he scrolled through documents. This is worse than I suspected, he said finally. They've had FDA approval for 3 months, but have been manufacturing artificial shortages to justify the price point. Eleanor watched him carefully, trying to gauge where his loyalties lay. Meridian is your client. And you are the mother of my child, Marcus replied evenly, meeting her gaze directly. The words hung in the air between them, a truth finally acknowledged after 8 years of silence. Beside them, Sophia's sharp intake of breath was the only sound in the room. What did you just say? She whispered, looking between the adults with wide eyes. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, unprepared for this moment, yet knowing it had been inevitable from the instant she saw Marcus in the conference room. Sophia, she began carefully, there's something I need to tell you about your father. But Sophia was already studying Marcus's face with new intensity, recognition dawning in her expression. The birthmark, she said suddenly, holding up her right hand where the distinctive heart-shaped mark was visible at the base of her thumb. You have the same one. Marcus nodded, extending his own hand to show the identical mark. I do. But you told me my father died, Sophia said to Eleanor, confusion and hurt evident in her voice. You said he died in Syria before I was born. I thought he had, Eleanor replied softly. After the bombing, I was told Marcus wasn't expected to survive his injuries. By the time I discovered I was pregnant, I had no way to contact him or his family. I sustained a traumatic brain injury, Marcus explained, his voice gentle as he addressed Sophia directly. I was in a coma for 3 months. When I recovered, I had gaps in my memory including specific details about my time with your mother. Sophia processed this information with remarkable composure for a 12-year-old, though her eyes betrayed her emotional turmoil. Did you know about me? She asked Marcus directly. Not until today, he answered honestly. When I saw your birthmark, when I learned your age, I suspected, but I've only had confirmation for about 30 minutes. Sophia turned to Eleanor. And you didn't look for him when you found out you were pregnant. I did, Eleanor admitted, but his company wouldn't provide any information. They said he was unavailable and wouldn't relay messages. Eventually, I stopped trying and focused on building our life. The hurt in Sophia's eyes was like a physical pain in Eleanor's chest. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I thought I was protecting you from disappointment, from feeling abandoned. I wasn't dead, and I wouldn't have abandoned either of you, Marcus said quietly, the first hint of anger coloring his controlled tone. If I had known, the unfinished sentence hung between them, a glimpse of an alternate reality where they had been a family from the beginning. Before anyone could speak again, Sullivan's voice came through the intercom. Sir, Meridian's head of security is demanding access to your office. He claims Ms. Morgan has stolen company property and is threatening to involve law enforcement. Marcus exchanged a look with Eleanor. It seems we'll need to address multiple situations simultaneously. He pressed the intercom button. Tell him I'll meet him in the conference room in 10 minutes. And Sullivan contact our legal team. I want them present for this discussion. After ending the communication, Marcus turned back to Eleanor and Sophia. We have several immediate concerns to address. First, your safety. Second, the evidence of Meridian's illegal activities. And third, He hesitated, glancing at Sophia. More personal matters. I need to get Sophia home, Eleanor insisted. Away from this situation. Meridian knows where you live, Marcus pointed out. They've been monitoring you since you contacted their whistleblower. Going home isn't safe right now. I'm not leaving, Sophia declared firmly. Not when I just found out my father is alive. Not when Mom's treatment depends on exposing Meridian. Marcus looked at his newly discovered daughter with unmistakable pride, then returned his attention to Eleanor. I have a secure residence not far from here. You'll both be safe there while we deal with Meridian. Eleanor wanted to object, to maintain the independence she'd cultivated for 12 years. But pragmatism won out. Marcus had resources she didn't, and Sophia's safety had to be the priority. Fine, she conceded. But I need to be part of whatever happens with Meridian. This isn't just about business for me. It's about survival. Marcus nodded, understanding the double meaning in her words. This was about her medical survival. Yes, but also about maintaining agency in a situation rapidly spinning beyond her control. Together, then, he agreed, extending his hand as if to seal a pact. After a moment's hesitation, Eleanor took it, feeling the same jolt of connection as before. Beside them, Sophia watched the interaction with keen interest, her analytical mind visibly processing the implications of this unexpected family reunion. None of them could have predicted how the day would unfold from there, how corporate corruption would collide with personal history, how old wounds would reopen alongside new possibilities, or how the fight for Eleanor's life would become entangled with the discovery of family bonds long thought impossible. But as Marcus Dawson arranged secure transport for the mother and daughter who had suddenly upended his carefully structured world, one thing became abundantly clear: nothing would ever be the same again. The safe house was nothing like Eleanor had expected. Rather than the sterile, utilitarian space she'd imagined, Marcus's secure residence was a spacious penthouse overlooking Millennium Park, its walls adorned with original artwork and shelves lined with an eclectic collection of books, history, biography, poetry, and surprisingly, photography monographs, including 2 of her own. You have my books, she observed quietly as Marcus escorted them inside. Having left Sullivan to manage the Meridian situation temporarily, Marcus glanced at the shelf, a hint of discomfort crossing his normally composed features. I followed your career when I could. After Syria, the admission hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to explore. Is this your home? Sophia asked, moving curiously through the space, examining photographs and artifacts that offered glimpses into Marcus's life. One of them, he replied. I maintain several residences for security purposes. Eleanor recognized the practiced detachment in his voice, the careful separation between personal and professional spheres that was common among those who worked in high-risk environments. She'd employed similar boundaries herself, once upon a time. There's a guest suite through that door, Marcus continued, gesturing down a hallway. 2 bedrooms, private bath. Make yourselves comfortable. I need to return to Horizon to deal with Meridian, but security is in place here. You'll be safe. I told you, I'm coming with you, Eleanor insisted. Whatever you're planning with Meridian, I need to be part of it. Marcus studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Eleanor, you're in active treatment for AML. You collapsed less than a week ago, according to your medical records. You accessed my medical records. Eleanor's voice sharpened with indignation. After meeting Sophia and learning about your condition, yes. He didn't apologize or attempt to justify the invasion of privacy, which somehow made it more difficult to argue against. Your oncologist has documented concerns about your energy levels and immune system. A confrontation with Meridian isn't advisable in your current state. You don't get to make that decision for me, Eleanor countered, stepping closer, her eyes flashing with the same determination that had once driven her into war zones. This is my fight, my life on the line. And my treatment, Sophia interjected, drawing both adults' attention. I've been researching Meridian's AML protocol for months. I understand the science, the market factors, everything. If you're confronting them, you need me there too. Marcus and Eleanor exchanged a look that contained an entire silent conversation, mutual recognition of Sophia's intelligence and determination, shared concern for her involvement, and the dawning realization that their daughter had inherited both their strongest traits. "I'm not bringing a 12-year-old into a corporate confrontation," Marcus said finally. "I'm not leaving my 12-year-old alone while her parents walk into potential danger." Eleanor countered. The word parents, plural, unified seemed to catch them both by surprise. A flicker of something passed across Marcus's face before his tactical mask returned. "Sullivan can stay with her," he proposed. "My most trusted security officer." "No!" Sophia and Eleanor responded simultaneously. Marcus pinched the bridge of his nose, a small gesture of frustration that struck Eleanor as oddly endearing. This man who commanded a global security firm, who had faced down terrorists and warlords, was being outmaneuvered by a stubborn woman and a precocious preteen. "We stay together," Eleanor said firmly. "All of us. That's non-negotiable." After a moment's consideration, Marcus nodded. "Together, then. But Sophia stays in the outer office with Sullivan during the actual meeting." Eleanor glanced at her daughter, who nodded reluctantly, accepting the compromise. "I need to make some calls," Marcus said, checking his watch. "The meeting with Meridian is in 40 minutes. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry." As he moved toward what appeared to be a home office, Eleanor called after him. "Marcus," he paused, turning back. "Thank you for helping us." Something softened in his expression. "Always," he replied simply, the word carrying weight far beyond its syllables. When he'd gone, Sophia turned to her mother, arms crossed in a posture that reminded Eleanor startlingly of herself. "Were you ever going to tell me," she asked, her voice carefully controlled, "about him, about who my father really was?" Eleanor sank onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the morning was fading, leaving the bone-deep fatigue of her illness in its wake. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "I told you what I believed was true, that your father died before you were born. By the time I realized Marcus might have survived, you were 4 years old, and I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of disrupting your life, of rejection, of having to explain why I hadn't tried harder to find him." Eleanor rubbed her temples, where a headache was forming. "It was easier to maintain the story we'd been living with." "Easier for you," Sophia said, the hurt evident in her voice. "Not for me. I've always wondered about him." "I know, sweetheart, and I'm sorry." Eleanor reached for her daughter's hand. "I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I was protecting myself too." Sophia was quiet for a moment, processing. "He seems good," she said finally. "Not what I imagined, but good." "He is," Eleanor confirmed, memories surfacing of the week in Syria. Marcus's quiet competence, his unexpected gentleness, the depth of conversation they'd shared despite the chaos surrounding them. "He was a good man then, and from what I can tell, he still is." "Are you going to tell him about your treatment?" "The real prognosis?" Sophia asked, her perceptiveness once again catching Eleanor off guard. "You shouldn't have to worry about these things." Eleanor sighed. "But I do," Sophia countered. "And he should too. He's my father. He deserves to know what's happening to you." Before Eleanor could respond, Marcus returned, his expression grim. "Change of plans," he announced. "Meridian's CEO is joining the meeting. William Keegan." He looked directly at Eleanor. "You've met him before?" Eleanor nodded. "At a fundraiser last year. I was photographing the event. He wouldn't remember me." "Don't be so sure," Marcus replied. "Your whistleblower contact was his executive assistant." The implications were clear. This wasn't just about recovering a thumb drive anymore. The highest levels of Meridian's leadership were involved, suggesting the evidence was even more damning than they'd initially believed. "Are we still going?" Sophia asked, concern evident in her voice. Yes, Marcus confirmed, but with additional precautions. I've called in some trusted colleagues. As if on cue, the elevator to the penthouse opened, revealing a tall woman with close-cropped silver hair and a lean, muscular build that suggested military training. Commander, the woman greeted Marcus with a nod. Quite the situation you found yourself in. Colonel Martinez, Marcus replied, gesturing her inside. Thank you for coming on short notice. He turned to Eleanor and Sophia. Colonel Rebecca Martinez, former Army Intelligence, now heading Horizon's Special Operations Division. She'll be overseeing security for our meeting with Meridian. Eleanor assessed the newcomer with a journalist's eye, late 50s. Confident bearing, the kind of person who noticed everything but revealed nothing. This wasn't just a security officer. This was a high-level operative Marcus trusted implicitly. Miss Morgan, Martinez acknowledged Eleanor with a respectful nod. Your Afghanistan series changed how the Pentagon approached civilian protection in conflict zones. It's an honor. The professional recognition, unexpected in the current circumstances, momentarily threw Eleanor off balance. Thank you, she managed. Martinez's attention shifted to Sophia, her expression softening slightly. And you must be Sophia, the young scientist whose project has everyone talking. Sophia straightened, clearly pleased by the acknowledgement. You've heard about my project. I have innovative approach to cost reduction for specialized treatments. Martinez's smile was brief but genuine. Intelligence runs in your family. It seems. The casual reference to family to genetic connections, only discovered hours ago, created a momentary awkwardness that Marcus quickly dispelled by moving to a secure laptop set up on the dining table. Colonel Martinez will brief us on the current situation at Horizon while we finalize our strategy, he explained, bringing up what appeared to be a building schematic on the screen. For the next 20 minutes, they discussed the approach Marcus and Eleanor would meet directly with Meridian's leadership, presenting the evidence and proposing a resolution that would include immediate release of the AML treatment at reasonable cost. Martinez and her team would provide security and ensure all parties remain productively engaged in the conversation. And if they don't cooperate, Eleanor asked the question everyone was thinking. Marcus and Martinez exchanged a look before he answered. We have leverage beyond the evidence on the thumb drive. Horizon provides security for Meridian's research facilities, including biometric access systems. We quite literally hold the keys to their operation. You'd sabotage your own client. Eleanor's tone wasn't accusatory but curious. This didn't align with the strictly ethical businessman Horizon's public profile suggested. I'd ensure ethical behavior from a client who's violated our service agreement, Marcus corrected. Meridian's contract with Horizon includes a morality clause that prohibits criminal activity. Price fixing is criminal. Eleanor studied him, seeing layers she hadn't anticipated. The Marcus she'd known in Syria had been principled, but pragmatic, focused on completing the mission without unnecessary casualties. This Marcus had built those principles into the foundation of his business, creating leverage to enforce ethical behavior even among the powerful. It was impressive. We should move, Martinez announced, checking her watch. The Meridian team has arrived at Horizon. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor noticed Sophia watching her closely, concern evident in her expression. The morning's excitement and revelations had taken their toll. Eleanor could feel exhaustion pressing down on her, making her movements slower, her thoughts less focused. Mom! Sophia's voice was low, meant only for her. Did you bring your medication? Eleanor nodded, patting her bag. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. But Sophia wasn't easily reassured. She turned to Marcus, who was conferring with Martinez near the elevator. My mom needs to take her medicine before we go, she announced, her tone brooking no argument. And she should eat something. The prednisone makes her shaky if she doesn't eat regularly. Marcus looked to Eleanor, who felt a flush of embarrassment at having her medical needs announced so matter-of-factly. But there was no pity in his gaze, only practical concern. There's protein bars and juice in the kitchen, he said. We have time. The simple accommodation adjusting plans to accommodate her illness without making it the center of attention touched Eleanor unexpectedly. For months, she'd managed her treatment alone, refusing help from friends, maintaining a facade of strength for Sophia's benefit. Having someone else acknowledge her needs without diminishing her agency was unfamiliar. As they rode the elevator down to the secure garage, Eleanor found herself standing between Marcus and Sophia, her past and her future, suddenly converged in an unexpected present. The physical resemblance between father and daughter was striking now that she looked for it the same analytical gaze, the same way of standing still while internally processing complex information. For a brief, disorienting moment, Eleanor allowed herself to imagine what life might have been like if the Damascus bombing hadn't separated them. If she'd found Marcus after learning of her pregnancy, if they'd raised Sophia together from the beginning. Then the elevator doors opened, revealing an armored SUV waiting in the private garage, and reality reasserted itself. They weren't a family reunited. They were three individuals thrown together by circumstance, facing an immediate threat that took precedence over personal revelations. Yet as Marcus helped her into the vehicle, his hand steady beneath her elbow, Eleanor couldn't quite suppress the feeling that something fundamental had shifted, that regardless of the outcome with Meridian, life would never return to what it had been before today. The Horizon Security Headquarters seemed transformed from the venue of a youth science competition to the fortress it was designed to be. As their convoy pulled into the private entrance, Eleanor noted additional security personnel at key positions, surveillance equipment more prominently displayed, access points more strictly controlled. Sophia, seated between her parents in the back of the SUV, appeared both nervous and exhilarated. "Is it always like this?" she asked Marcus. "All these security measures?" "Not always," he replied. "But Horizon was built with contingency plans for various threat levels." "Like DEFCON," Sophia nodded, familiar with the concept. "What level are we at now?" A faint smile touched Marcus's lips. "Let's call it elevated caution." Colonel Martinez, riding in the front passenger seat, turned slightly. "The Meridian delegation arrived 10 minutes ago. CEO Keegan, head of security Donovan, their legal counsel, Patricia Wells, and two individuals identified as board members." "A significant showing," Marcus observed. "They're taking this seriously." "They should," Eleanor said grimly. "Their entire business model is about to be exposed." As the vehicle stopped in the secure garage, Martinez turned fully to address them. "Ms. Morgan, Mr. Dawson, once we enter the building, stay with your assigned security at all times. Sophia will remain with me in the adjacent observation room during your meeting." "I can handle myself." Sophia began to protest, but Eleanor placed a gentle hand on her arm. "This isn't about your capabilities, sweetheart. It's about keeping you safe while we deal with people who've already demonstrated they'll target a child to protect their interests." Sophia subsided, though her expression remained mutinous. Marcus studied his newly discovered daughter with what appeared to be both concern and admiration. "Sullivan will show you the Security Operations Center while we're in the meeting," he offered. "Most 12-year-olds don't get to see that." The prospect of exclusive access to advanced security technology mollified Sophia somewhat. As they exited the vehicle, Eleanor was struck again by how naturally Marcus seemed to understand their daughter's psychology. Despite having known her for mere hours, Horizon's executive floor was eerily quiet as they were escorted to the conference room. Through glass walls, Eleanor could see the Meridian delegation already seated 5 individuals in expensive suits, their postures betraying varying degrees of tension. At the head of the table sat William Keegan, Meridian's CEO, a man in his 60s with silver hair and the polished appearance of someone accustomed to wielding power. Eleanor recognized him from the charity event she'd photographed, where he'd given a speech about Meridian's commitment to accessible healthcare for all. The irony was nauseating. Before entering, Marcus turned to Sophia. "Wait here with Colonel Martinez. Sullivan will come for you once we've established the parameters of the discussion." Sophia nodded, suddenly solemn. Be careful, she said, the words directed at both adults. Eleanor hugged her briefly, while Marcus hesitated, clearly uncertain about the appropriate gesture for a daughter he'd just discovered. He settled for a reassuring nod before placing his hand lightly on Eleanor's back, guiding her toward the conference room. As they entered, Keegan rose, his expression carefully neutral. Marcus, this is an unexpected development. William, Marcus's tone was professionally cordial but cool. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting on short notice. Keegan's gaze shifted to Eleanor. And Ms. Morgan, I believe we've met before. Briefly, Eleanor confirmed, taking the seat Marcus indicated directly across from Keegan. At the Children's Hospital benefit last year, I was the photographer. And now you're... What exactly an industrial spy, a corporate saboteur? The accusation came from a man to Keegan's right broad-shouldered, with a military haircut and cold eyes. Donovan, the head of security. Eleanor presumed. I'm a journalist, she corrected calmly, investigating credible allegations of illegal price fixing and market manipulation. Allegations based on stolen proprietary information. The woman beside Keegan interjected. Patricia Wells, the attorney, her expression professionally disapproving. Marcus placed a thumb drive on the table, not Eleanor's original, but a copy he'd made at the safe house. This information wasn't stolen. It was provided by a whistleblower protected under federal law. Janelle Porter violated her non-disclosure agreement, Wells countered. Any information she shared is tainted and inadmissible. Whistleblower protections supersede NDAs when the information pertains to illegal activity. Marcus replied evenly. And we're not in court, Ms. Wells. This is a private discussion about Meridian's business practices and their implications for our ongoing relationship. Keegan's eyes narrowed at the implied threat. Horizon has a contractual obligation to provide security services to Meridian facilities. An obligation that includes a morality clause, Marcus confirmed. Section 17.3 specifically allows for immediate termination if the client engages in criminal activity that poses reputational risk to Horizon. The atmosphere in the room chilled perceptibly. You're suggesting Meridian has engaged in criminal activity based on unsubstantiated claims from a disgruntled employee? Keegan's tone was incredulous, but with an undercurrent of concern. I'm stating that Meridian has deliberately delayed release of an FDA-approved treatment for acute myeloid leukemia to artificially inflate market pricing, Marcus replied, his voice hardening. A treatment that has been clinically ready for distribution for 3 months while patients who need it are dying. Eleanor watched the exchange with a journalist's trained eye, noting the micro-expressions that betrayed Keegan's discomfort, the slight tension around his mouth, the almost imperceptible shift in his posture. He hadn't expected Marcus to be so well-informed. The pharmaceutical industry has complex regulatory and production challenges, Keegan began, adopting a condescending tone. Launch timing for new treatments involves numerous factors beyond FDA approval. Factors like ensuring the price point extracts maximum profit from desperate patients. Eleanor interjected, unable to contain her anger. Like determining exactly how much a human life is worth in dollars, Keegan's gaze snapped to her, his expression hardening. Ms. Morgan, you clearly have a personal stake in this matter. Your diagnosis colors your perspective. The revelation that he knew about her medical condition information that should have been private sent a chill through Eleanor. Before she could respond, Marcus spoke, his voice dangerously quiet. You've been monitoring Ms. Morgan's medical records. It wasn't a question, and Keegan didn't bother denying it. Meridian maintains relationships with healthcare providers who participate in our clinical trials. Ms. Morgan's oncologist is among them. That's a HIPAA violation, Eleanor said, anger sharpening her focus despite her fatigue. Not when patients sign broad consent forms for information sharing, Wells interjected smoothly. Standard practice for anyone considering experimental treatments. Eleanor remembered signing such forms during her initial diagnosis, desperate for any option, skimming legal language that seemed irrelevant to her immediate survival. "So you know I need your treatment," she acknowledged, meeting Keegan's gaze directly. "You know it could save my life and the lives of thousands like me, yet you're deliberately keeping it off the market to maximize profits. We're ensuring sustainable pricing that allows for continued research and development," Keegan corrected, his corporate mask firmly in place. "Pharmaceutical innovation requires significant investment. The documents show your production costs are less than 10% of your planned market price," Marcus stated flatly. "Your own internal analysis indicates you'll recoup development costs within the first 6 months of release, even at one-third your target price point." Keegan's expression tightened, his gaze shifting to Donovan as if seeking confirmation of exactly what information they possessed. The security chief gave a small nod, his expression grim. "What exactly do you want, Marcus?" Keegan asked finally, abandoning pretense. "Why are we really here?" Marcus leaned forward slightly, his posture relaxed but his eyes intense. "Two things. First, immediate release of the AML treatment at a reasonable price point, no more than 150% of production cost. Second, a complete review of Meridian's pricing strategies for all life-saving medications, to be overseen by an independent ethics committee." A bark of laughter escaped Donovan. "You're delusional. The board would never agree to that. They might, when the alternative is federal investigation and public scandal," Eleanor countered. "I have enough evidence to publish a comprehensive expose. How will Meridian's stock price respond to headlines about deliberately withholding life-saving treatment for profit?" "You'd be sued for defamation before the ink dried," Wells warned. "Truth is an absolute defense against defamation," Marcus replied calmly. "And Ms. Morgan isn't the only one with evidence. I've taken the liberty of sharing copies of these documents with select members of Congress who sit on healthcare oversight committees." This was news to Eleanor, who glanced at Marcus with surprise. He'd been busy during those phone calls at the safe house establishing leverage beyond what she'd anticipated. Keegan's facade finally cracked, anger bleeding through his corporate veneer. "You'd destroy a company that employs thousands, that develops treatments saving millions of lives, over one pricing decision? A decision that costs lives," Eleanor corrected, her voice steady despite the rage she felt. "My life, potentially. The lives of other patients who can't afford to wait while you optimize your profit margins? And I'm not looking to destroy Meridian," Marcus added. "I'm offering a path forward that serves both your business interests and ethical obligations. Release the treatment, adjust your pricing model, and this information remains private. The alternative will be considerably more damaging to Meridian's future." A tense silence fell over the room as Keegan considered his options. Eleanor could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes, weighing potential losses against the certainty of scandal if they refused. "I would need to consult with the board," he said finally. "This isn't a decision I can make unilaterally." "Three of your board members are in this building," Marcus pointed out. "Sullivan can escort them here if you'd like to discuss immediately." Eleanor watched Keegan's expression shift as he realized how thoroughly outmaneuvered he was. Marcus had anticipated every move, every delay tactic, every attempt to dilute the urgency of the situation. "Give us the room," Keegan instructed his team. 15 minutes. As the Meridian representatives filed out, Marcus gestured for Eleanor to follow him into an adjacent office. Once the door closed behind them, she released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was intense," she admitted. "You were prepared for every counter-argument?" Marcus smiled slightly. "Tactical planning was my specialty in the SEALs. Corporate negotiations aren't so different from hostage situations. Understand your opponent's priorities. Control the environment. Maintain leverage." Eleanor studied him, seeing again the layers she'd missed in their brief time together years ago. "You've done this before. Pressured clients to behave ethically. When necessary." He moved to a small refrigerator in the corner, extracting 2 water bottles and offering her one. Horizon's business model depends on our reputation for integrity. We can't maintain that while enabling corporate malfeasance. Eleanor accepted the water gratefully, suddenly aware of how dry her throat had become during the confrontation. As she drank, a wave of dizziness washed over her, a reminder of her illness. Momentarily forgotten in the adrenaline of the meeting, Marcus noticed immediately, moving closer as she steadied herself against the desk. "You should sit," he said, concern evident in his voice. "I'm fine," she insisted automatically, though she did lower herself into a chair. "Just need a minute." Instead of arguing, Marcus simply sat beside her, respecting her need to maintain dignity without abandoning her to struggle alone. It was a delicate balance that few people in Eleanor's life had managed to strike since her diagnosis. "Sophia mentioned prednisone," he said after a moment. "Part of your current treatment protocol?" Eleanor nodded. "Along with a cocktail of other medications that barely keep the disease in check. The experimental treatment Meridian is withholding, it's my best chance at remission." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "I reviewed your medical records. Under normal circumstances, Eleanor would have been furious at the invasion of privacy. Now, exhausted in facing the man who had unwittingly become entangled in her fight for survival, she found she lacked the energy for indignation. Then you know my prognosis without it." Marcus met her gaze directly. 8 to 12 months, according to your oncologist's notes. The clinical assessment, spoken aloud in his steady voice, hit Eleanor with unexpected force. She'd maintained such careful control over her emotions since the diagnosis, focusing on practical matters, treatment options, financial arrangements, preparing Sophia as much as possible. Hearing her mortality so plainly acknowledged broke something loose inside her. "She's 12, Eleanor whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "Too young to lose her mother. Too young to be alone." "She won't be alone," Marcus said, the simple declaration carrying the weight of a solemn vow. "Regardless of what happens with Meridian, regardless of anything else between us, she's my daughter. I'll be there for her." The promise, offered without hesitation or qualification, allowed Eleanor to voice the fear that had haunted her since the diagnosis. "I don't want her to forget me." Something shifted in Marcus's expression, a softening that revealed the man beneath the tactical exterior. "Eleanor, no child forgets a mother like you, and I would never let her forget, even if such a thing were possible." He hesitated and then added, "I lost my mother when I was 14. Cancer. Ironically, my father was absent. My grandmother raised me after that. I know what it means to lose a parent, to cling to memories as they fade. Sophia won't experience that. Between your photography, your journals, and the people who love you, she'll always have access to who you are." The personal revelation, one of few he'd offered, created a moment of connection that transcended their complicated history. Before Eleanor could respond, a knock at the door announced Sullivan's arrival. "Meridian is ready to continue," she reported, "and Sophia is asking for both of you." Eleanor gathered herself, pushing aside personal concerns to refocus on the immediate battle. "Let's finish this." As they returned to the conference room, they found Keegan alone at the table, his expression resigned but composed. "The board representatives have authorized me to accept your terms," he announced without preamble. "Meridian will release the AML treatment immediately at the reduced price point you specified. We'll also establish an ethics committee to review our pricing strategies with independent oversight." Relief washed through Eleanor, momentarily weakening her knees. Marcus's hand appeared at her elbow, steadying her without making a show of support. "In return," Keegan continued, "we require a non-disclosure agreement regarding the documents provided by Ms. Orne Porter and a commitment that no information about our internal pricing discussions will be published." "Agreed," Marcus said. "With one addition, Eleanor Morgan receives immediate access to the treatment at no cost as part of Meridian's compassionate use program." Keegan's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. "That can be arranged." Our legal team will draft the necessary paperwork. My team will review it, Marcus countered. We'll finalize details by end of day. The meeting concluded with terse handshakes, the tension in the room easing but not dissipating entirely. As Keegan departed, Eleanor felt a complex mix of emotions: relief at securing the treatment, vindication that her journalistic instincts had been correct, and lingering anger at a system that required such extraordinary measures to secure basic ethical behavior. You did it, Marcus said quietly once they were alone. The treatment will be available within days. We did it, Eleanor corrected, acknowledging his crucial role. I couldn't have leveraged Meridian without your resources and influence. Before Marcus could respond, the door burst open and Sophia rushed in, followed by an apologetic-looking Sullivan. Sorry, sir. She insisted on coming in the moment Meridian left. It's fine, Sullivan, Marcus assured her. We're finished here. Sophia looked between her parents anxiously. Did they agree? Will they release the treatment? Eleanor nodded, opening her arms to her daughter. Yes, sweetheart. They're releasing it immediately. And I'll be receiving it as part of their compassionate use program. Sophia's face transformed with joy as she flung herself into her mother's embrace. So you're going to get better for real. The treatment has a 78% success rate for patients with my genetic markers. Eleanor reminded her, not wanting to overpromise. It significantly improves my chances. Over Sophia's head, her eyes met Marcus's, communicating the more complex reality they both understood, that while the treatment offered genuine hope, Eleanor's advanced disease state and previous unsuccessful therapies complicated her prognosis. Marcus nodded slightly, acknowledging the unspoken message. Then, with characteristic practicality, he refocused on immediate concerns. We should contact your oncologist, he suggested. Make arrangements for you to begin the treatment as soon as possible. Caricio. The next hours passed in a blur of activity calls to Eleanor's medical team, coordination with Meridian's research division, arrangements for the first treatment session scheduled remarkably for the following morning. Throughout it all, Marcus remained present, handling logistics with quiet efficiency, allowing Eleanor to focus on explaining developments to Sophia. By early evening, they had returned to Marcus's safe house, exhaustion finally catching up with all of them. Sullivan arrived with takeout from an upscale Chicago restaurant, comfort food elevated to gourmet status, along with a bag containing clothes and necessities for Eleanor and Sophia, retrieved from their apartment under security escort. As they ate around the dining table, Sophia peppered Marcus with questions about his work, his background, his life before Horizon. He answered with surprising openness, revealing pieces of himself that Eleanor suspected few people ever saw: his childhood in South Chicago, his grandmother's influence on his moral compass, his reasons for joining the military after college. Is that where you got that scar? Sophia asked, pointing to the mark near his right temple. No, that was from the bombing in Syria, he replied, his eyes briefly meeting Eleanor's across the table. The one where I met your mother? Sophia looked between them curiously. How did you meet exactly? Mom never talks about her time as a war photographer. Eleanor set down her fork, realizing they'd never properly explained their history to Sophia. I was covering refugee movements near Damascus. Our media convoy came under fire, and Marcus's team was providing security. I pulled your mother out of a collapsing building, Marcus added, a faint smile touching his lips. She was more concerned about her camera equipment than her own safety. That camera had my best work from the assignment, Eleanor defended, finding herself smiling despite the serious memory. You would have done the same. Probably, he conceded. We're both stubborn that way. Sophia watched their exchange with keen interest. And then what happened? How did you... You know? She gestured vaguely between them, her implication clear. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks, unprepared to explain the whirlwind connection that had led to Sophia's conception. It's complicated, sweetheart. We spent a week working in close proximity, Marcus supplied, his tone matter-of-fact but carefully edited for 12-year-old ears. Your mother was fearless, brilliant, and had a perspective on the conflict that challenged my understanding. I found that compelling. The description, so different from the usual physical attractions highlighted in romantic narratives, struck Eleanor as perfectly capturing what had drawn them together: intellectual and ethical connection in the midst of chaos. Then there was a bombing at a press conference, Eleanor continued, picking up the narrative. Several people were killed. Marcus was critically injured. In the evacuation chaos, I was told he wasn't expected to survive. I was in a coma for 3 months, Marcus explained to Sophia. When I woke up, your mother had already left Syria. I tried to find her, but by then she had changed careers, moved to Chicago, and discovered she was pregnant with me, Sophia finished, filling in the blank. Why didn't you keep trying to find her? Marcus considered the question carefully. I did for almost a year, but eventually I had to accept that she had moved on with her life. I didn't know about you, or I would never have stopped searching. The simple truth hung in the air between them: all the lost years, the missed opportunities, the parallel lives they'd built separately that might have been one shared journey. So what happens now? Sophia asked, voicing the question Eleanor had been avoiding. Marcus looked to Eleanor, clearly unwilling to presume or impose. That's something your mother and I need to discuss. But not tonight, Eleanor added gently, noting Sophia's poorly concealed yawn. It's been a long day for all of us. As they cleared the dinner dishes, the domestic normalcy of the activity struck Eleanor as surreal 12 hours ago. Marcus had been a memory from her past, and now they were functioning as co-parents, making decisions together, establishing new boundaries and connections. The guest suite is ready for you both, Marcus said as they finished. There are new toothbrushes, pajamas, everything you should need in the bathrooms. Thank you, Eleanor replied, genuinely grateful for his thoughtfulness. For everything today, he nodded, his expression softening. Try to rest. Tomorrow we'll be busy with your first treatment session. As Eleanor and Sophia prepared for bed in the guest suite, she was acutely aware of her daughter's watchful gaze, the analytical assessment so like Marcus's, observing and cataloging every interaction between her newly discovered parents. He's different than I imagined, Sophia said as they settled into their respective beds, the connecting door between their rooms left open. When I used to think about who my father might be. Different how? Eleanor asked, curious despite her exhaustion. Sophia considered for a moment. More contained, like there's so much happening inside him that he doesn't show, except sometimes when he looks at you, or when he was talking about his grandmother. Then you can see it all. The perceptiveness of the observation didn't surprise Eleanor. Sophia had always been unusually attuned to emotional undercurrents, but its accuracy did. Marcus Dawson was indeed a man who kept his inner life carefully guarded, revealing himself selectively and purposefully. He had a difficult childhood, Eleanor explained, and his military training emphasized emotional control. But you're right, there's much more to him than he typically shows. Do you think he likes me? The question, asked in a smaller voice than usual, reminded Eleanor that despite Sophia's maturity, she was still a child seeking acceptance from a parent she just discovered. Sweetheart, he's completely in awe of you, Eleanor assured her. The way you handled yourself today, your intelligence, your courage, he's incredibly proud. I can see it every time he looks at you. Sophia smiled sleepily, reassured. Good, because I think I like him too. As her daughter drifted off to sleep, Eleanor remained awake, her mind too full for rest despite her physical exhaustion. The day's events played in endless loops: Marcus's shock at discovering Sophia's existence, the confrontation with Meridian, the unexpected teamwork that had emerged between them, and beneath it all, the undeniable awareness that something still existed between them, some connection that 8 years of separation hadn't erased. Eleanor slipped quietly from her bed, careful not to wake Sophia. She needed air, space to think beyond the confines of the guest suite. Wrapping herself in the plush robe Marcus had provided, she made her way to the living area, expecting to find it dark and empty. Instead, she discovered Marcus seated on the terrace, a tumbler of what appeared to be whiskey in hand, staring out at the Chicago skyline. He turned at the sound of her approach, not surprised by her appearance. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, setting his drink aside. Eleanor shook her head, moving to join him at the railing. "Too much to process. I know the feeling." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes. The city lights spread before them like earthbound stars. Eleanor was acutely aware of Marcus beside her, his height, his warmth, the familiar scent of cedar, and something uniquely him that triggered memories she'd thought long buried. "She's extraordinary," Marcus said finally. "Sophia, you've done an amazing job raising her." "Thank you," Eleanor replied, genuinely touched by the acknowledgement. "She makes it easy, most of the time. Too easy. Sometimes I worry she takes on adult concerns because I've been alone with her." "You haven't been alone entirely by choice," Marcus observed, his tone not accusatory but thoughtful. "You've maintained your independence deliberately." Eleanor considered denying it, then decided honesty was simpler. "Yes, after believing you were dead, after adjusting to single motherhood, independence became my defense mechanism. If I needed no one, I couldn't be hurt by loss." Marcus nodded, understanding evident in his expression. "A reasonable adaptation to trauma. I've employed similar strategies." "And now," Eleanor asked, the question encompassing far more than she could articulate their shared daughter, her illness, the unresolved connection between them. Marcus turned to face her fully, his expression more open than she'd seen all day. "Now, I find myself wanting to be needed. By Sophia, by you, if you'll allow it. Not because you can't manage alone. You've proven beyond doubt that you can, but because sharing the burden might give you space to focus on healing." The offer, framed in terms of practical support rather than emotional entanglement, was perfectly calibrated to breach Eleanor's defenses. It acknowledged her strength while offering partnership, not as a replacement for her independence, but as a complement to it. "I'm not good at accepting help," she admitted. "I've noticed," Marcus replied, a hint of amusement warming his voice. "But consider it not for your sake, but for Sophia's, for mine. Even finding a daughter I never knew existed, only to risk losing her mother before we've had a chance to—" He broke off, emotion briefly overwhelming his usual control. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes, the reality of her illness suddenly sharp between them. "To what?" Marcus met her gaze directly. "To see if there's still something worth exploring between us? Something beyond co-parenting? Beyond the past? Something new?" The honesty of his answer caught Eleanor off guard. She'd expected platitudes, perhaps, or careful distance, not this direct acknowledgement of possibilities neither of them had anticipated when the day began. "I don't know if I can offer that," she said softly. "My future is uncertain at best." "All futures are uncertain," Marcus countered. "My years in combat taught me that much. We make plans knowing they may change. We build connections knowing they may be temporary. The uncertainty doesn't diminish the value." Eleanor studied him in the city light, seeing both the man she'd known briefly in Syria and the one who had emerged in his place more weathered, more grounded, but with the same core of integrity that had drawn her to him originally. "One day at a time," she offered finally. "No promises beyond that." Marcus nodded, accepting her terms without pushing for more. "One day at a time," he agreed, as they stood together on the terrace, the Chicago night enveloping them. Eleanor felt something shift within her, not a dramatic realization or emotional epiphany, but a quiet adjustment of perspective. The independence she'd guarded so fiercely hadn't protected her from loss or pain. It had merely ensured she faced those challenges alone. Perhaps there was strength, too, in allowing connection, in building bridges rather than walls, in accepting that love, in all its forms, was worth the risk of loss. Tomorrow would bring the first treatment session, the beginning of a medical journey with uncertain outcomes. But for tonight, Standing beside Marcus with their daughter sleeping peacefully nearby, Eleanor allowed herself to imagine possibilities beyond survival, a future where healing encompassed more than her physical body, where family meant more than biological connection, where second chances arrived in unexpected forms. The path ahead remained unclear, fraught with challenges both known and unforeseen. But for the first time since her diagnosis, Eleanor felt something that had been notably absent in her careful plans and pragmatic arrangements. Hope, not just for remission or extended time, but for a life more richly connected, more deeply experienced, more fully shared than the one she had built alone, one day at a time. Time moves differently when mortality casts its shadow. Months once taken for granted become precious currency. Promises whispered under Chicago's night sky carry the weight of uncertain tomorrows. Yet within that uncertainty, Eleanor, Marcus, and Sophia found something that transcends guarantees, the courage to build connections despite their fragility. They came together as strangers, bound by blood and separated by circumstance. A warrior who built walls around his heart, a photographer who captured everyone's truth but her own, a child wise beyond her years, bridging worlds she never knew existed. Three souls navigating the ruins of what might have been to salvage what still could be. The battle against Meridian was only the beginning. Eleanor's treatment offers no certainties, only possibilities. Marcus's newfound fatherhood presents challenges no tactical training prepared him for. And Sophia stands between them, the physical embodiment of a love interrupted by fate's cruel timing. Perhaps that's the truest measure of strength, not the ability to stand alone against the storm, but the willingness to reach for another's hand when the skies darken, to acknowledge that independence, however fierce, pales against the quiet power of belonging. In the fading light of day, sometimes the most beautiful horizons appear just when we feared the darkness would consume us entirely.